Technical difficulties here. I guess it's not going to allow me to do this on my computer. So, all right. Let's see. Is that okay? Cool. Well, let's see if we can get the chat going. Great. All right. Well, I guess it's not wanting me to record on my computer. So, hello, if anybody's watching. I hope that somebody's watching. I see that there are 3 people here. But welcome to the chat. Can anybody message in the chat? I can't see it. So, let me try messaging to myself. Hello. Sweet. Okay, it did pop up. Awesome. All right. It is 7:01, and I'm in here. Oh, we got a Mr. Benavidez on the stream here. Well, welcome everybody. Sorry for this upright angle. I thought I was going to be able to record this on my laptop, and it doesn't appear that I'm going to be able to record this, unfortunately. So maybe we'll have to do another one of these, but this is 10 Degree Pale Lager here. I figured I would go ahead and crack a little lager for you for this live stream. Tanglefoot Brewing, obviously. Morning from Queensland, Australia. That's dope. Thanks for joining. That's awesome, Matt. And then Matt Benavidez is a buddy of mine. He actually brews over at a brewery in Temple called Bold Republic. So cheers to everybody. Hope y'all are having a great day or night or whatever time it is in your area. Morning in Queensland, Australia. So I'm going to take a sip of my lager. All right. Well, for the people that we do have on the stream already, it's just Gnome Brewing. Cheers to you as well. Can y'all hear me well? The phone is kind of like sitting on the table, so I don't know if the audio is great or not, but if anybody has any feedback, I can move it or whatever. But I guess I can go ahead and jump right in. So I started this Q&A from, I got a comment on a post that I did about the 5 tips to brew better beer. Somebody asked for some more detailed explanation about the barrel aging process that we went through when I was working at another brewery in Austin called Black Star Co-op. What's up, Richard from Scotland? That's awesome. Thanks for joining the live stream. Yeah, that will be the first question that I answer. But if anybody else has any other questions, drop them in the chat. And then I have a couple of other ones kind of on standby that I've had a few folks ask over the years. But yeah, if anybody has anything, just let me know. So we'll jump right into it. Q&A time. The question that I got initially from, let's see if I can pull up the actual video. But I did a video of the 5 best tips to brew better beer. And in one of the tips, I said, be intentional. And then I described a time in my brewing career where I kind of took a step back from the process that we were normally following, and then just reevaluated every step of the process after attending a specific seminar at CBC. This was back in like 2016 or something like that. And then I got a comment from, I don't know how to, Sinzanik? Is it Jay Sinzanik? Whoever, he just commented, so I know he's on here. So Jay Sinzanik, this is for you. So I mentioned that I attended a seminar at CBC, and they covered kind of like barrel aging basics and a little bit more complexity to it. And what I took out of that seminar was being intentional, and that's why I added it to that specific video. But to dive into that a little bit deeper and be much more specific, the goal leaving CBC in total, but leaving that seminar was to brew and create a better, completely intentional barrel aged beer. So what we did was we built a brand new recipe from scratch that was designed to basically make a really great base beer. And in this case, it was about a 12% super roasty. I think it was subsidized with some oats in there for some full mouthfeel. And so we built this base recipe, but not a base recipe that was perfect on its own. So one of the big takeaways was brew a beer that is going to receive whatever character you're going to get from the barrel aging process. And so the end product is the best possible version of that beer. So what we did is we made this kind of like obnoxiously roasty, big, not super syrupy by modern day brewing categories, but a thicker, more viscous, big boozy stout that would then receive all of the flavor from the bourbon barrel. So it would pick up the actual whiskey character. It would pick up a lot of the tannins from the oak. And then more importantly, it would pick up micro oxidation over time. So the biggest change that we made was putting that kind of this base beer that was designed to receive all of those flavor contributions, and then also allow it to mature for a much longer period of time. So we initially were barrel aging for about 4 to 6 weeks, which was basically just pulling out flavor from the barrel. And then we decided to bump that up to a minimum of 8 months. And my story on this, which I tell my brewer friends often, is we put the beer turned out great, the base beer. We ended up cold crashing out all of the yeast, which we had never done before. So highly recommend doing that. Crash out all of the yeast and only put the good beer into the barrels. Don't bring any yeast along for autolysis reasons and other things. But we crashed out all the yeast, put the beer into the barrels, which if you do that, it will warm up and it will overflow. So just be cautious of that if you're barrel aging. But we decided that 6 to 8 months was like the bare minimum we were going to age the beer in the barrels. So after 6 months of aging the beer in the barrels, and I think they were Woodford bourbon barrels, nothing too crazy, but they were decent spirit in there. Tasted the beer and was like, yeah, that's a barrel aged beer. It tastes good, but not really the difference that what I was expecting after spending all this time prepping to make this what I thought would be an awesome beer. Then we tasted it again at 7 months, and it was kind of the same thing. Like, all right, tastes like a whiskey barrel aged beer. Tasted it at 8 months, kind of the same thing. 9 months, it's like, oh, it's getting there. And then at 10 months, it like clicked. It just completely changed. So the reason for the prolonged barrel aging process is, one, to extract all the flavor, but two, to have that micro oxidation kind of change the malt compounds in the beer and kind of rounds it out and smooths it out and softens it. And one of the terms that I really loved from that seminar that I attended was it fattened it up. So after 10 months, we tasted it and we're like, this is on point, and then let it age a couple more weeks, and it hit the 11-month mark, pulled it out of the barrels, bottled it up, put it in very special bottles, put a very special label on that beer, and then it ended up being one of the most awesome beers that we ever made at Black Star. So that is a longer answer to the question than a 5-minute video on YouTube. So I hope that helped. I hope that was some insight. If you have any follow-up questions, just drop them down below. All right. So, hey, Allie's on here. What's up? Allie's my sister. All right. Small Soldier movie. Oh, yeah. Small Soldiers. I haven't seen that movie in probably 15 years. I'd love to know, with your lagers, are you doing step mash or are you doing decoction mash? So I do a modified decoction mashing schedule at Tanglefoot. So the reason that I do what I do at Tanglefoot is, again, same thing with the barrel aging process. My goal is to start with be intentional about the end goal. Like, what do I want the beer to be in the end, and then work backwards from there. So historically, decoction was used and step mashing and decoction used in tandem for conversion purposes, and then the decoction kind of stayed in the brewing process, at least in Europe, for all of the flavor contributions. So I wanted to bring some of that, like the Maillard reaction, the extraction of tannins, just the different components of what decoction brings to the beer without we don't need to do step mashing, or I mean, you could argue that you would want to do step mashing, but in my eyes, I do not need to perform a step mash to get the extraction and conversion that I'd like from the beer. So it's mostly just for flavor. So what I do is I pull off, it's not a third, actually with the new system, it's much less than a third of the mash, but I pull off a mash literally with like a saucepan as my ladle into another pot that I boil over an open flame and get it nice and bubbling and caramelizing for about 20 minutes. And then I reintroduce that portion of the mash back into the full mash. That increases the temperature a few degrees, and it also imparts all that good kind of Maillard caramelization flavor that you look for in decocted Pilsner. So short answer is I do a modified decoction, nothing super crazy. All right. Woremember what the barrels were? We used so many barrels at Black Star. We used some Woodford, like I mentioned. We used some Jack Daniels way back when. Honestly, one of the best, if you're looking for barrel flavor, which I think a lot of brewers look for, which is basically whiskey. Like if you're looking for the flavor of whiskey in the beer, then my personal experience has been using shorter aged barrels or spirits that are maybe not as like long aged or high quality. One, you're not stripping out all of that carbon and wood character from the wood barrel itself, and you're getting some of that like really assertive bourbon that's left in the staves. And we used, what was it? Heaven Hill, I think, which is like it's like a subsidiary brand of Woodford or whatever the big Buffalo Trace conglomerate is. I can't keep track. But anyways, we use like the lower end spectrum of the barrels, and we found that gave the best kind of like raw whiskey bourbon character. Start with 6 months and go up. Yep. We'd start with 6 months, put it in a barrel, wait 6 months and just taste it and be patient and wait for it to change. Richard, how did the jockey box work out at the beer festival? The jockey box was good. It's not the ideal serving method for Tanglefoot specifically, but in a festival setting, I kind of went back and forth with trying to decide whether or not I wanted to bring out a kegerator and lucre taps to basically pour the beers like I pour them at Tanglefoot. Ultimately decided that would be not ideal. Like people aren't standing in line and waiting for a beer and then have me explain about the pour in a plastic cup. So just decided that the jockey box would work fine. It functioned fine. The only downside to a jockey box is that if you have lines exposed like I did in the hot sun, the beer in the line from the keg to the jockey box heats up and the CO2 breaks out of the beer. So basically it's like all of the CO2 in that stretch of line comes out of solution, creates air pockets so that when you're pouring the beer, it gets cooled down through those coils, but there will still be pockets of CO2. So that's kind of made the 13-degree pour a little bit more foamy than it would have. But it worked out fine. All right. Is there another question in here? Does anybody else have any questions? Who else is on here? I'm just going to sit here and drink beer too. So I'm happy to blather on for the next 40 minutes, but I know that someone had one of the most common questions that I had when I got feedback on the podcast. I had several people reach out. Actually, I had some folks reach out to me to schedule phone calls about kind of their idea for starting a brewery and their vision of what they were looking to do and if it was a good idea. But so I guess I can kind of overview the most broad questions that I get when people ask me about starting a brewery. So I swear, this is like the biggest piece of advice I give people for everything, not just brewing related, just in life, but be intentional. So if you are looking to start a brewery, and let me wrap this up and more cleanly, the question is, what is the best piece of advice before starting a brewery? or what should I do if I want to start a brewery? And my biggest piece of advice is be intentional. So if your goal is to start a brewery to make money and just sell beer and kind of live the brewer's lifestyle and just have fun, maybe put the brakes on and reconsider what your true goal is. But if your goal is to open up a very specific beer style brand, if you want to brew Czech lagers in Temple, Texas, and you've thought about the whole brand and you want to bring that to the market and see if the market is interested in having that there, then I highly recommend pursuing that. My biggest complaint or whatever pet peeve in the industry has been kind of the no direction in a brewery, where like whether it doesn't have to be beer specific, but just like open a brewery and they will, like, people will come and buy all of my beer because I opened a brewery. Those days are gone. So if anybody has any preconceptions about that, those days are gone. But filling a gap in the market, or maybe it doesn't need to be beer related, but being the local watering hole in a great location in a small town, you can totally still do that. If your expectations are to start a $50,000 or 50,000 barrel brewery and distribute all over the state, maybe temper those expectations. But who's to say it's not possible? Still, it may still be possible, and there are probably people that are in the industry right now that are going to achieve that goal. So just temper your expectations and then be intentional about what you want to bring to the market. And if it doesn't work out, then pivot and change and all the other classic business stuff. Awesome. Any more Brew Day videos planned? That's a really good question, Richard, because I was not planning on doing any more Brew Day videos, but that video is the most viewed video on the channel. So I'm not sure, my follow-up question to you is, what specifically would you like to see? I kind of detailed all of the processes in the brewery that I do for every one of the beers. Is there anything else that would be more interesting to see that is not just the same video of me stirring the mash from above and sweating? Sorry, I was reading some comments. So if you have any follow-up to that, I will answer that. But no other Brew Day videos are planned, but could totally do another one if it makes sense. Awesome. Yeah, it's process to barrel. Anything, the beer is usually a little too thick and sweet, and the barrel is sharp whiskey, seeking balance. Absolutely true. Matt, our No Direction is definitely the beer collab that we need to do, and it will be a black hazy IPA. Trevor, what have been the 3 most expensive equipment items you need to start your brewery? So this actually ties into what I wanted to talk about if nobody else was asking questions. So thank you for asking questions. But I will say that obviously equipment is like a huge expense, but the reason that I started Tanglefoot was the opportunity. So a lot of people, I think, maybe I should detail this better in other videos, but I think a lot of people assume that I started this because I just needed to do this project. In reality, I had an opportunity in my family's barbecue restaurant to open a brewery and really wanted to try something out, but I had no desires to open a brewery from scratch. I did not want to get any financing. I did not want to get any investors. I'm very averse to debt. And so all of that was like a huge hurdle for me, that I would not have started a brewery unless this opportunity came up. So that's a caveat to all this, and that my expenses have been very, very low compared to other breweries that have opened up. But within that kind of smaller version of how to start a brewery, the equipment was, this second round of equipment I bought was like 25 grand. With all the other stuff that I bought to put it together and get it assembled, probably 30 grand all in. I built the bar out for like $10,000 and just like just material costs. So if anybody's been into Tanglefoot and been to this beer saloon, with the kegerator, the taps, the glasses, the bar, the wood was very expensive. And then I just worked on it after I got off shift at the other brewery I ran. I would drive up north an hour and work on the bar every night. But free labor from that perspective. So I had access to tools and stuff like that. So probably like 30, 40 grand of just equipment and the bar getting open, not to mention if you were to open a brewery, in my experience talking to other brewery owners, equipment is a huge part of it, but my opinion is like the lease or the rent or the mortgage of the building that you buy is a huge factor in the success of a business, not just breweries, just a business in general. So definitely make sure that you're able to meet that rent payment every month if this is something that you're actually looking to do. Looks like the brewery has been growing. It has been slightly. It's been slow, but I'm seeing some things change for the positive, and I'm stoked. I'm putting more music and getting food trucks out there. I do not have a spunning valve to carb my beers. I do cap off my fermentation vessels at the end of fermentation to capture as much CO2 in the beer as possible, but I do not have spunning valves yet. It's definitely on the list of things that I want to do. And then I force carb to get up to where I want the carbonation level to be. WD, what do you think being a traditional Czech brewery will... do you think a traditional Czech brewery will stunt your growth? Do you plan to branch out to other beer styles? I know the area has a Czech background. That's a really great question. So I do not. So I've been in the industry for about 10 years. The brewery that I ran in the past is called Black Star Co-op. It's in Austin, Texas. I got to brew every style imaginable. I went to all of the conferences. I've been immersed in education for the last 10 years, at least with respect to the beer industry, and have felt like I've done all of the things creatively that I wanted to do in the beer industry. And then this project was specifically to like paint myself into a corner. So I don't think it depends on what you mean by growth, like growth of the business for sure. Like the growth of the business is definitely stunted by focusing on just these styles of beer in the short term. But my thesis is kind of this brand can grow to be the go-to beer in Temple, Texas. And so that's kind of the thought process there. But yeah, short-term business-wise, yeah, of course, I could get more people in by brewing hazy IPAs and stouts and fruited sours and all that good stuff, which I've done plenty of, and I talked about earlier in this Q&A. But yeah, definitely stoked on focusing on very specific styles. Brew day with recipe. Would love to taste your beer. A bit far away, so would love to make it. So I do have a video on the channel that details the scaling down, or basically creating a recipe of the 10-degree pale lager. I'm going to be doing another video of creating the 12-degree pale lager and the 13-degree Tamave soon-ish, but there is a recipe for a 5-gallon homebrew batch, an all-grain homebrew batch on the website. If you want to jump on there and download the exact recipe, it's on there. So yeah, but stay tuned. I'll do the other two beers as well. Need a little beer. Also, thank you everybody for being on here. This is pretty cool. Is there generally a minimum size for a brewery to start with? 5-barrel, 10-barrel? Is bigger better for future growth? Good question. There is no right answer. Again, it's expectations and what you plan to do. So the way the market has changed in the last, even 5 years, everything is pivoting towards more on-site taproom sales. And so I bring this up a lot when I talk to other brewer friends about kind of one of the reasons that people got into the industry. When I got into the industry is like, you want to brew beer, you want to be around this beer culture, you want to get beer into people's hands. And what I've seen the industry become more recently is basically an event space. Like you're opening a bar, venue, and if you have food, restaurant type event space where people come from other places to you to obviously buy your beer over the counter at the highest margin possible. So when you're considering building out a brewery, starting smaller is if you were to, it's very nuanced, but if you were to give like one piece of advice, yeah, start small and then grow if the demand is there. The days of kind of opening a production brewery and just exclusively doing that are kind of the, I don't know if they're over, but it's much more difficult once you crunch the numbers on margins and distribution. It's pretty abysmal. But I would say like a 5 to 7 barrel is a good starting point if your goal again is to have a tap room with events and people coming out, lots of seating space, maybe an outdoor area. I think the size of the brew system is less important. It's more about fermentation space and your capacity. So like I have a 3-barrel system, or I can knock out 3 barrels of beer. If you have a 3-barrel system, but you have 20 3-barrel tanks, you could brew, every single week, and you could produce as much beer as, well, not as much beer as you want, but a lot of beer, more beer than you could sell through theoretically. So it all depends on what your goal is. If you're looking to distribute throughout the state, start with a 30-barrel system and get 10,000 barrels of brewing capacity. But that is a totally different business than what I'm in right now. WD, I'm in DFW. I know I will get to try your beers eventually. Looking forward to it. Well, I hope you do. I actually was raised in McKinney and grew up around that area, and my family's still up there, so I visit them from time to time, and who knows, maybe a keg of Tanglefoot beer will show up in that area in the near to late future. I don't know, but I'll blast it out if anything happens. Clint Martin, hey, what's up, dude? Just catching up. All right, we're 26 minutes into this. Anybody else got any questions? Anybody? What are y'all drinking? Is anybody drinking a beer that is of note and not just a Coors Banquet? Nope. Okay. Well, let me see if I can pull up another question. All right. Something else I get asked a lot, which I kind of briefly detailed earlier, but why did I pick Temple, Texas to start the brewery? My family owned a barbecue restaurant there for 54 years, and the opportunity came about when the city code changed to be able to sell alcohol on premises. My dad applied for a beer license. They got the license, and then changing from just being able to sell alcohol, sell beer and wine, to a brew pub was super simple. So just talked about starting a little mini brewery and made it happen. So, and then the concept came out of that. So started with the location and then worked backwards to get the Czech lager. All right, let's see what everyone's drinking. Drinking an amber lager from Manhattan Project. Oh, cool. I haven't had their stuff yet, but I've heard good stuff. Hazy IPA from Manual Labor in Sherwood Park. I've not heard of them. How's the remodel going? The remodel of what specifically? So if you're in regards to me moving out of the beer saloon, I moved I got a new kegerator. There's a video on that. Put it out into the front. I haven't done any major construction or remodeling. Honestly, all of the things that I want to do 1,000 different things, but all of it is kind of hamstrung by money, which is, the cash flow in a small business is always kind of the limiting factor. But that's been kind of the main thing that's holding back any major physical improvements. But I do want to eventually get a patio going. But primary focus right now is increasing production, because I've got I started distribution. For those that didn't know or didn't watch the video, I started distribution, so there's a couple of kegs out in the world, and in order to increase that to any reasonable amount, I need to get some more tanks and a different glycol unit, which maybe I'll talk about the summer heat in just a second, because that has been awful. Drinking a homebrew smash pale ale, dope. Way to go, Drew. Bomb Brew. Bud Light Clamato. Will G, what's up? Matt Saudi, my day off, so having a Brett Saison. Where's the Saison from? You brew it? Not tonight. Not drinking tonight. Okay, everyone hit the like. Yeah, Will. Get them to hit that like button. So I just kind of touched on it a little bit, but the things I need to do to increase production are, buying tanks and increasing production with the tanks that I already have. But the summer hit here in Texas, and it is super hot. It's like, I think today it reached like 103, and the place that I'm brewing at is in the back of the restaurant, which is just a Haydite cinder block building with very little to no ventilation. It's an oven, and I have an indoor glycol unit. So the glycol unit cools down the glycol solution. And the way that all refrigeration units work is they, use a liquid that's compressed and then expanded, and it cools down. And then the fans that blow on the evaporator coils discharge all that heat, and all that heat just goes right back into the building. So that compounds every day that it gets hotter. And so the tanks can't really maintain super well. And then I have to... And then when I do brew, it gets insanely hot back there. Let's see. All right, homebrew, dope. Trevor, did you need to work with the city regarding volume of water needed for brewing? Anything special for wastewater? So this is an interesting question where, in fact, a lot of questions about like starting a brewery or opening a larger brewing system I don't have good insight into, in that I started this super tiny, very low budget, very kind of like as easy as I could make it so that I could just get open. But I do know that a lot of people deal with this issue, and I probably will deal with this issue more once my production starts increasing, but I did not have to deal with any weird restrictions. I don't use that much water. In fact, water is like the cheapest part of the entire brewing process. Like, brewing is very water consumptive, and there's a lot of waste and all that stuff, but water's really, really cheap. And so on my scale, it's kind of, I don't know, it's like a drop in the pan. So if I do increase production, I'm sure there'll be some downstream wastewater management stuff. I know a lot of breweries, Austin starting to crack down on having separating, what's it called? Basically any biomass from the stuff that you're discharging down the sewer. So you basically would have to collect all the yeast trube and get rid of it before you discharge it down the city main. Otherwise you'll get fined. You have to pH correction, temperature correction, but I have not had to deal with that yet from the city, but who knows, maybe it's coming. Maybe I'm still under their radar. WD, it is sweltering. Swanee from Oz. I've not heard of Swanee. Clint Martin, more tanks versus lager tanks. Where's the break point where lager makes sense? So do you mean like specifically on the geometry of the tank, like not cylindriconicals, just the round horizontal tanks? Larger. Sorry, I read that wrong. Yep, I got lager on the brain and in my belly. More tanks versus larger tanks. So again, it depends on what you're looking to do. If you want to open a brew pub, like a restaurant with constantly rotating beers, more tanks is better in my opinion. If you have, there's a brewery here in Austin, probably one of the most famous brewers in Austin, called Pint House Pizza. They have 7-barrel systems at their 2 main pubs, and they have a ton of tanks, and they just crank them out. So they just turn new beers, and you can brew the same beer as much as you want, but you can't scale down a 20-barrel tank to a 5-barrel batch. So if you're looking for variety, more tanks is better than larger tanks. But if you're looking for production, specifically to send out into distribution, larger tanks is going to be your best bet. Yes, Austin is required to dilute waste. Not fun, Matthew Benavides. Brew to saison, then put in the keg, add Brett, and let sit for 4 months. Put it in the fridge with self-carbonated. Bloody nice. That sounds awesome. I So here's a little tidbit that I didn't think I'd share in here. After being in the industry for 10 years, I don't drink a ton of craft beer outside of lagers. My palate has been pretty burnt out, and I've drank everything under the sun, and I just ultimately came back to lagers. But I have had some cravings recently for some Brett beers, specifically maybe some saisons that just, I don't know, maybe they were what I got into first when I got into homebrew. But yeah, I'd like to try some tasty Brett beer soon. Larger, bigger, got it. Sorry, Clint. Working on any new recipes? No new recipes. So right now the portfolio is the 10, 12, 13. Those are the main beers that will be on year round. The 14 degree Politamave, which is an amber lager, is currently on and is the spring summer seasonal. And then I have the 22 degree Tamave, which is the kind of stout version of the 13 degree Tamave, the dark lager. I really want to focus on those. When I first opened, I thought I was going to have two beers. I thought it was going to be the 10 and the 13, and then quickly realized that I wanted a premium Czech Pilsner, so I added that. But I only have 4 taps on my kegerator. So as far as service is concerned, I can only brew 4 beers, or I can brew more, but I'm only going to focus on brewing 4 beers because I can only serve 4 different types of beer. So that's kind of the plan, really focusing on making the best style or the best versions of these styles of beers that I can. Queensland. Yeah, Paul and Clint, right? Both out there in Australia. Tanglefoot. Oh, is Tanglefoot electric brewing or some other method? It's all, it's manual. There's some electric pumps, but it's manual and it's propane burners. Are you doing vertical tanks or horizontal? I have 2 fermentation vessels that are both cylindroconical, so cylinder with a cone. Those are 4 barrels volumetrically, but I only brew about 3 barrels into them. So the hydrostatic pressure is not that significant, and I haven't noticed any difference between when I was brewing in the Spiegel kind of plastic barrel things that it was my first brew system, and I haven't noticed any fermentation byproducts that are not ideal. And honestly, I've been really happy with these cylindriconicals. But for those that don't know, lager tanks are generally, they're horizontal and longer and have more surface area. So the idea is that yeast contacts the beer for a longer period of time, or not for a longer period. The yeast contacts the beer more effectively on a wider distribution, and so it lagers quicker because it's all just contact time. But these tanks do not have they're not long and tall, so that there's a very small amount of yeast contact area and all this beer up here. So they work well for primary fermentation, and then I rack it to my bright tanks, which are basically mini lager tanks. They're just dished bottom serving vessels, bright tanks, whatever you want to call them. Why can't you scale down? 5 barrel fits in 10 barrel tank, other than potentially wasting production space. So you can't, like that example, you could scale down, but I mentioned before, you can't scale a 20 barrel tank to a 5 barrel tank. And the biggest reason, or one of the biggest reasons, is it's super inefficient. So if you turn on the glycol jackets of a tank that's, vertical video, so I'm going to keep doing this, but a tank that's from here to here, and the glycol jackets run out the entire tank, and you're only brewing down here, you're basically, your fermentation's happening in this cone area versus what the tank was designed to do. I mean, I guess you could, but the main fermentation is one aspect of it, but the brew house is the other aspect. So if you have a 20 barrel brew house and you're brewing into a 20 barrel tank, scaling 20 barrels to 10 barrels is probably possible, but definitely not down to 5 barrels, because you're either you have steam jackets, or you have, maybe the burner is will warp the bottom of the boil kettle because you don't have enough liquid in there to transfer the heat to. But also the production issue is a problem. How hard is it to get the same beer every batch? Always thought that would be tricky. It is tricky, but that's one of the benefits of only brewing 3 beers regularly and 5 beers annually, is that you have a lot of practice. So I get to brew the exact same beer, very specific specifications that I'm trying to hit. And to be fair, I don't brew the exact beer every time. My hop lots are different. My knockout gravities are different. My finishing gravities are slightly different, but they're all within this like margin of error that is acceptable for me. So if I have a beer that I'm brewing a 13-degree Tamave and I get a 9-degree Plato wort in the boil kettle, and I can't get down to the gravity without boiling for 10 hours, that wouldn't be acceptable. But about a 0.5 degree Plato here or there is not the wildest thing. And these beers are pretty I don't know, they're pretty tolerant to maybe the IBUs are slightly higher. Maybe it's 40 IBUs instead of 38 IBUs, or maybe it's 36 instead of 38. So it's not like I'm not hitting everything precisely, but I try to stay within the ballpark and brew as consistently as possible. I've been watching Tanglefoot for ages, Matt. I do spirits. That's dope. What kind of spirits? Brewing Bad. Hi. What's the story behind the name Tanglefoot? Tanglefoot is an old nickname for Temple. The story goes that Temple was an old railroad town, and the combination of the muddy streets and the liquor made it difficult to walk through the downtown corridor, so it would give you Tanglefoot. And a lot of people that live there don't know that story, so it definitely resonates. It's definitely a brand that was built for the city that we're in. Strictly beer for me unless I'm a fake bourbon barrel porter. Doing a fake bourbon barrel porter. Okay. Horizontal tanks can be stacked in breweries that don't have 30-foot ceilings. That's true. Very true. So, the geometry of the tank, not just from a fermentation perspective, but a storage perspective, is super important. So a lot of people will start breweries and they'll necessarily have to get these like tall, skinny tanks. In fact, one of my good buddies that owns a brewery here in Austin, he's got some tall, skinny tanks, and sometimes you just have to make it work with the location that you have. Equipment limitations, but also physical limitations, Clint, because like I just mentioned, like your location will determine the brew house that you get. Like I couldn't put a 30-barrel brew house in Tanglefoot unless I built out a completely new facility. So kind of working with what I got. How often are you brewing a new batch on average? So I usually brew about every 2 weeks. So I have two primary fermentation vessels and 2 bright tanks, but one of those bright tanks is a dedicated cold liquor tank. So I can and primary fermentation in each of those primary fermentation vessels takes about 3 weeks, all said and done. So from knockout to cold crashing to 36 degrees takes about 3 weeks. So I can only turn one of those tanks every 3 weeks. And then the way that it works out, it could be more frequent, but the way that it works out with yeast management and just the way that brew days fall and racking and other brewery processes, it works out to be about every 2 to 3 weeks, which is not a lot, by the way. I want it to be more. I want to be brewing every week. Got a friend who did the opposite. He went down, dug out the floor to accommodate a 7-barrel system. Dope. That is interesting. I don't know if I know of a brewery other than like clearing out an already existing basement area. Ben Martinek, that's my brother. Yeah, thanks. Interesting origin story. He knows. He's the one that found the name Tanglefoot, by the way. That's a little known fact, is that the name Tanglefoot, well, it's a nickname for Temple. I didn't even know it. And he started a band and called it Tanglefoot after doing some Wikipedia research. Any collabs with other breweries in the future? So, yes, we will be doing another collab with Bold Republic, who Matt Benavidez is on here. We'll be doing a collaboration with them in the near future for a Czech event that they're going to be hosting in October. But Collaborations, this is probably going to be one of the last collaborations that I do, at least for Tanglefoot, or at least like at Tanglefoot, or served at Tanglefoot, because the concept is so specific that I think I've done 3 collaborations so far. And so you can either go light, dark, heavy, light, and then whatever ingredients that you want to throw in there as far as like the traditional Czech styles are concerned. And I've done several of those. There's still, a few other variations that we could possibly do, but I've just ultimately kind of been, I don't know, like I brewed an 11-degree pale lager with different malts and different hops with Balcones and Waco, and scratched that itch, and then brewed kind of a 13-degree pale lager with Texas Beer Company, and that was super fun and interesting. They got to do this whole new thing on their system, but I can't serve collaboration beer on tap at Tanglefoot because I only have 4 taps, and I self-distribute now, so I can't serve other people's products. So collaborations would, for me at least, the interesting aspect of it would be going to other breweries to either learn or like collaborate on the process, and not necessarily having it be like, hey, we're doing this collaboration release here at Tanglefoot, if that makes any sense. Cold liquor tank, meaning for lagering? No, cold liquor tanks is a term for the tank that holds water, that it keeps it cold, so that during the knocking process you can cool the wort down effectively. We use counterflow heat exchangers that hot wort goes through one side of it, cold liquor goes through the other side of it, and it transfers heat. And so I take 212-degree boiling wort and knock it down to 50 degrees Fahrenheit by sending cold water through it. And that is one of my bright tanks, is the dedicated storage of that cold water, which is a huge pinch point in the brewery, unfortunately. So until I get a new one, that will be the case. Matt, hi, I see you. Bold Republic. Wow, it's already been 47 minutes. See, once you get me going, it's just keeps coming out. Any other stragglers in there? Anybody else got a question? Anybody else drinking anything interesting? I see Matt's trying to get Paul to send him a bottle. I like this little beer bartering. That may be the slowest I've ever drank a 12-ounce can of beer. 47 minutes. Let us correct it with a 13-degree Tamabe. Oh, this, I don't know why I didn't even realize this is backwards. So it's backwards for me. Is that front way for you? Fun tidbit while I'm waiting for the endless amount of questions to roll in. I chose to can the beer, and the primary reason for choosing this package as opposed to bottling was I wanted to eventually sell beer at golf courses. And if you've ever been to a golf course, you can't have glass, or at least none of the golf courses that I go to. So the impetus behind choosing to can beer as opposed to, which arguably bottles would be more kind of premium and a nicer package, but I wanted to get my beer out into a golf course, so decided to start with that. There you go. Oh, Ben, you got one? Cracking it? Good. It's the front way. Front way is the best way. Anything else? Any other any updates from any of the viewers? Anybody on YouTube have anything to share with the audience? I'm just sitting here by myself in this room drinking a beer. 13-degree all day. Yep, same here. Or just part of the day. I will switch to whiskey right after this. I haven't gone through all your videos yet, and you may have done it already, but could you do one that shows your system along with an explanation of the function and your process? So I do have, let's see. Yeah, I have a video called I think it's called Brewing Czech lagers in a tiny brewery or something like that. That's like the most popular. Has more views than any other video online. Check that out. If that doesn't answer any questions, please let me know. I know it seems like I don't know. It's a very common YouTube thing. Like comment, like, subscribe down below, but please leave comments. I respond to all the comments, and if you want to see anything, let me know. I'm happy to film it. I've got several videos that I want to film, and it's just kind of the timing and figuring out how to film them. And it's a lot of work to make the videos, and I've recently been much more excited about putting more effort into it, like writing a script and figuring out the kind of the storyline of the video. So, but please let me know if you have any other suggestions. Great stuff, Tanglefoot. Love the content. Thank you. Is it Bureaucreus, right? I think I said that right. They love clips. Can you say happy birthday? I can. RCB, just kidding. Happy birthday. I don't know your name, but happy birthday. RCB, I'll check it out after this. Always enjoy those types of videos. Yeah, so it's like a 40-minute long video that details this is actually the whole brew day of the 13-degree Tamabe. Birokoi. Okay, got it. I was always confused about that. Can I sing happy birthday? Yeah. Yeah, I'm very good at it, actually. But I'm afraid that they'll shut this live down because of the copyright, the happy birthday song. All right, what's another thing? What's another question? I know I had a couple prepared, but I was late getting this set up, so they've slipped my mind. Oh, like the Iroquois native tribe. Okay, that makes more sense. Okay, still got a few people on here. Anybody else? We beer drinkers are tribal. That's very true. We stick to the lagers or the ales. Yeah. Well, I'm not sure if I have anything else for you. I could ramble on about something, but maybe just give a few. Oh, there you go. We got a question. How many times a week are you brewing? I answered this earlier, but happy to do it again. I brew about once every couple of weeks. So I have 2 fermentation vessels. Each fermentation takes about 3 weeks from knockout to cold crashing. So I can only brew once every 3 weeks into one fermentation vessel. But yeah, so super limited by my equipment at the moment as far as production. The second is going down faster. Very true. This is going down faster than the 10 degree. Would you ever mess with newer yeast, or are you traditionalist? So I like that you added, or are you a traditionalist? Because no, I'm not a traditionalist. I'm not a anythingist, but for what I'm aiming to do with this specific beer concept is to brew the best lagers that I can brew for the time and place that I'm in. And they happen to be Czech lager style, or I mean, they're Czech lagers, I'm Czech, but they happen to be Czech lager style. And that's great. But like, I have no hard and fast rule about like I have to use exactly this. I use the ingredients that I use, like I use Pils and malt. I use only Czech sauce hops because I think it makes the best beer possible. And I've played around with different and newer yeast, but I don't have any. I don't anticipate using them in this concept specifically. But who knows? Maybe I start bourbon barrel aged stout hazy IPA brewery concept in the future. Brewing all 3 beers 1 day a week. No. I brew. I literally have like 1 brew day every couple of weeks, and so I have to manage the schedule of when those beers are brewed, which can be tricky actually. So when I add with just the 2 fermentation vessels, I can only have 2 beers in a tank at any given time, obviously, and then 1 of them in a bright tank. So that's 3 beers. But when I add the seasonal beers in is when it gets really tricky, because I've got like, say, 10 degrees in primary, 12 degrees in primary, and 13s in the conditioning tank. If I add the 14 into it, then it just like disrupts the whole flow. It's kind of a weird juggling act. After the chat, I'm kegging my Czech Amber and did a 12% smoke malt. Looking forward to trying it. What kind of smoke malt? Can you let me know what kind of smoke malt you used? Thanks for everything. Best of luck with your brewery. Thank you. Looking forward to it. If you do it again, got a keg of my coconut porter. Enjoy that coconut porter. I will definitely do this again. Do you have any other beer festivals planned besides your own? What is your favorite brewery beer? 2 good questions. I do not have any on the books as far as beer festivals are concerned planned yet. So the reason that I participated in the one that I did 2 weeks ago was that beer festival was super good for the brewery. Not that any of the other ones aren't, but financially speaking, I got to sell my beer there. And so for me to dedicate time away from the brewery, and I had my girlfriend run the brewery, but for me to like leave the tap room and go somewhere else to run a brewery or run a festival, it usually doesn't make financial sense unless I can sell the beer, which I did. And I sold like $1,000 worth of beer, which was awesome. And it was worth the work. But no, I don't have any on the books yet. Maybe something else, like it would have to be this similar like concept. I'm not going to sell a keg of beer to a festival and then go staff it and pour it and set up a tent and break it down for the cost of wholesaling a keg, but maybe something in the future. And then besides your own, do you have a favorite brewery beer? So I love Live Oak Brewing in Austin, Texas. They are a huge inspiration behind this entire brand. And I love everything they make. Favorite beer. I mean, that's changed so many times over the years. I used to drink a lot of Sculpin. I really like that beer. And it's, again, with the whole like craft beer, being in craft beer for so long, my palate doesn't gravitate towards like super hoppy 7% IPAs anymore. But I used to love Sculpin. What is Jaswani? Toochgrass? What does that mean? Ben, hypothetically, if you were to start another project, what style would you brew? Again, it depends on the specific market, what I am interested in at the time. I've always thought about starting a barrel-aged project, but maybe not a physical location, maybe like a gypsy brewing type thing. But I've always had a love for a good barrel-aged beer, specifically like a bourbon barrel-aged stout. How long do you typically lager your beers? How long do you keep them on yeast? Good question. So all of the beers take about 2 months to make. Primary fermentation is about 3 weeks from fermentation, all the sugars being consumed, diacetyl rest, and then cold crashing. That's about a 3-week period. So it's on yeast for at least 3 weeks. Then I transfer it to a bright and then to kegs for the 2-month period. So keeping it on yeast is important, but I think what's more important is just giving it time. So like you could, and I do this actually. So like after the 3-week period, if you rack it off that yeast into another container, that could be a keg, it could be a bright tank, any other storage container, that beer will continue maturing. There's still yeast in the beer, and all the maturation is not just yeast driven. Like most of it is yeast driven, but clarification just from sediment precipitating out, and just sulfur being expelled, all of the other things that happen of just beer sitting in a tank doesn't have to be directly on contact with yeast, at least in my experience. That's just my thoughts on it. Have you had a bad batch of beer at Tanglewood? It's Tanglefoot. But yes, I've had to dump 2 batches of beer. When I got my new system, I scaled up from a 1 barrel brewery to a 3 barrel brewery, and I was technically a 4 barrel brew house, 4 barrel tanks. And so, against the recommendations of the former brewery owner, I went ahead and jumped headfirst into brewing a batch of beer and boiling it in the single boil kettle. They said they used to split it into 2 vessels because the burners weren't adequate enough to boil it effectively. I said, whatever, I'm just going to try it. And had DMS in 2 batches of beer that was unmistakable. And I had to dump 2 batches of beer, and I was closed for 6 weeks because of it. That sucked. What's your turn time on a batch from mill to knockout? And I'm sure you mentioned it, but I missed it. How big is your brew house? The brew house, like I just mentioned, is about 4 barrels, 3 to 4 barrels, but I knock out 3 barrels of work. It takes me about 6 to 7 hours, depending on the beer and depending on if things go wrong. Because like every day, it's always something. I'm generally slightly underprepared for things, and so like maybe I forgot to get propane, or maybe I actively didn't get propane until the day of the brew day, so it takes longer. And then takes me an hour to drive up and an hour to drive back. So add that into it, and it's about a 8 to 9 hour brew day. I just don't understand. Paul, thanks for joining, man. Appreciate you. HNNRRK. Cheers. Oh, Beechwood. Great. Thank you for commenting that. Beechwood is an awesome smoked malt. Using anything else other than Beechwood can be like great in its own right, but can be very overpowering. We did several smoked beers at the previous brewery I ran, and Beechwood is a very nice complement to malt. Oh, got it. Just Wani. Well, I won't need to boot you. I'm going to hop off after these last few. Brewing first all grain Czech premium pale lager next week after watching your videos. That's awesome, Derek. Excited to see how it turns out. Sweet. Yeah. That's super cool. Temperature control. Can you recommend any good resources for developing Czech beer recipes? Yeah. Drinking beer, I guess. Developing the recipe is an interesting one, because it's my opinion that the recipe isn't a super important part. Recipe is obviously very important, but it's not as important as people give it the credit for. So my recipes, I'll tell you every single one of my recipes exactly, and like, depending on how you execute it, you're probably not going to brew the same beer that I brew. So it's all about the execution of the hot side, fermentation control, temperature control, giving it enough time. But there's a few YouTube videos that have talked about Czech lagers, and then I think the most recent podcast from Craft Beer and Brewing, when they had that tour in the Czech Republic, those are super insightful from the brewers over at, I think it's Pilsner Urquell and Budvar and somewhere else. But yeah, those are good resources as well. Live Oak is right by my house. You're very lucky. Red Gum, Mountain Ash. Okay. Dude, Independence in Austin had a barrel-aged version of their stout, and it tasted like cheese. It was such a weird batch. Ooh, cheese. Yeah, that's most likely. Oh, what is that? Anyways, yeah, I dealt with that cheese funkiness in a specific batch of beer that I had to dump at Black Star once. It was awful. Kettle sour. Real cheesy. Foot cheese, like Parmesan cheese. Probably expensive as hell too. Yes. Party Time Brewing, Tanglewood is what you're going to call your brewery originally. My road is Tanglewood Drive. Oh, dope. There's a road called Tanglewood in Temple as well, but Tanglefoot is the actual name. 3 weeks for primary seems really, really long. Are you using slow yeast or crashing gently over several days? At my brewery, we're almost always crashed by day 14 for lagers. So this yeast is slower, and the geometry of the tanks are they promote a slower fermentation, like not intentionally, but these squattier tanks, they're not like super slim and kind of narrow cone. They promote, or at least in my experience, promote like a slower fermentation. And then the diacetyl rest on these beers, I'm always like extra cautious with the diacetyl rest. Like the primary may be over in 9 days or 12 days, whatever it is, but I always give it that extra time. And then the crashing, I go from 60 to 50 and then 50 to 36 over the course of a few days. Oh, Matt Benavidez is also my mom. Thanks, Mom. Matt Saudi, Terry, good question. What was Terry's question? Yes, good resources for Czech lagers. Love what you're doing. There are many of us looking on and pulling for your success. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Trevor Tanglefoot, what notes do you keep for each stage of the process, mash to packaging on tap? So I track all of the, but I guess I could be more specific. I track mash temp, mash pH, kettle volume, strike temp, boil time. I adjust hops. I mean, my hop lots change pretty significantly, and I'm hopping exclusively with Saaz. So the difference between a 3.5% alpha acid Saaz crop and a 4% alpha acid Saaz crop can change the additions pretty drastically. So I track that. I track the knockout temp, fermentation gravities, but I don't do fermentation pHing or anything like that. Nothing too crazy. I don't do any sensory. Since it's just me, I'm very, I remember pretty much every single brew day that I've ever had. Not like to the detail, but I remember what happened in each batch. And so from a sensory perspective, I don't track anything, or at least keep notes. But as I grow, I'm sure that will be more of a concern. Matt, after our recent trip to the Czech Republic, I want to start brewing Czech lagers. I want to serve them authentically, but don't want to spend $400 for a liquor tap. Yeah, they're expensive. I don't have to. Cheap alternative. It's funny you bring that up. I talked about this with the first account that I started distribution with. They wanted to in fact, they were into getting a Lucre tap, but I kind of felt bad. I don't want somebody to have to spend $400 to serve my beer. And frankly, I think the beer stands on its own. So if you wanted to pursue that, I recommend getting a Lucre tap. Not many other taps are going to work exactly the same, but there are some European style taps that are forward. The action is forward, that they're ball valves. And so the concept is still the same, where you crack it open a little bit, it creates a lot of foam, and then you open it all the way and pours clean, good beer beneath the foam. But there are some, I think it's on the Micromatic website. They have they're called European taps. Speaking of recipe, what maltsters do you like? I'd imagine you have pretty strong opinions on what the best Pils malt is. It's funny, I don't have a really strong opinion on Pils malt, but I use exclusively Weyermann malt, except for a touch of honey malt. But yeah, Weyermann the company is great. I actually got the chance to go out there and tour the facilities years ago, and it was amazing. Their base malts are awesome, but their specialty malts are really the selling point. And so if I'm going to order a pallet of grain and fill it up with malt, I'm just going to get Weyermann. They're much more expensive though. So as I scale, maybe reconsider. Honey malt. Yes. So I mentioned it in the breakdown of how to brew my 10-degree pale lager at home, but I use honey malt in a very small percentage in the 2 pale lagers. So at the beginning of this Q&A, I talked about how I don't do decoction or step mashing for any conversion purposes. I do it specifically for flavor contribution, and that's why I put honey malt in there as well, instead of doing a 2-hour decoction where I boil multiple times. You can subsidize with a small amount of caramel malt and get some of those same kind of bright caramel notes. And this is actually something that maybe not specifically with caramel malt, but this is something that is more common than you would think in the Czech Republic. It's kind of this dirty secret that people don't talk about, where they're not all doing triple decoctions over a copper kettle for 16 hours a day. How many hours a day do you work at the brewery? It just depends. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, when I'm open for service, I'm open 1 to 8, so that's 7 hours. But I usually get there around 9 o'clock and do canning and stuff before I open. So 9 to 8:30, 11 and a half hours sometimes, and then brew days are 6 to 8 hours and all the other cellar stuff. But I think about it 100% of the time. So if anybody is looking at starting a small business, it's 100% of the time. What do you think about Cara Bohemia? That is a malt that most people would use where I use honey malt. So that is the malt that most people ask me about. Dang, you're rich using Environment. Go win a medal at WBC or GABF and get those. I have them. I have the red overalls. What's up? I won a gold medal in 2015 at Black Star Co-op for the robust porter that we brewed, and I have a pair of overalls. And if you ever come to the brewery, they're in the beer saloon, and I will. I guess I'll take a picture and post it on. Or I did. I posted it on my Instagram, so scroll through there. And yes, I'm so rich in love and happiness. Yeah, Randolph do. Yeah, won a gold medal. Got the overalls. Actually got 2 pairs because it was at Black Star. It was me and one other brewer, Mike, who's a good friend of mine, and reach out to him. They usually just send 1 pair, and I messaged him, was like, come on, like, give us another pair. It's just us 2. And they sent us another one. So, all right. Well, I guess that's it. This has been nice. It's been cool talking to y'all. We're about an hour and 11 minutes in. We went a little bit over, which is no problem because I have no schedule. But I really appreciate everybody jumping on here. Richness is a quality attribute. I appreciate that comment. Yeah, thanks so much for jumping on here and having any questions. I hope I answered everything. If you don't have any, or if you didn't get your question answered, which I can't imagine you did because I think I read everything, but feel free to email me at andy@tanglefootbrewing.com or drop a comment on another video, and we will definitely do this again. Thanks for sticking with me the whole way through. It really is, yeah, it's really cool to see everybody on here engaging and not just in here talking to myself, even though I am literally in here talking to myself. But thanks again, guys. Killed it. Till next time. Na zdrowie.